Jay-Z said it best, and I'm always going to follow this saying. He said, you want my old stuff? Well, listen to my old songs.
Yo. We got Levi's Wide.
Check out the full podcast. Link below.
We got to talk about our underdogs making the best music today. Q, you brought this sort of to the forefront. Where were you going with this?
Thoughts. Gunna's album came to my mind. And while listening to it, obviously there's a theme attached to Gunna's album. It's about, resiliency. It's about ignoring, the outside noise and the people trying to bring you down. It may not be the best album he's ever made, but I thought it was the most enjoyable Gunna album, like from start to finish. The one word that I think a lot of rappers don't use these days is purpose. A lot of rappers are coming into the game without a purpose.
Okay.
Or if they are in the game, they're dropping songs that don't really have meaningful lyrics, meaningful topics. And I felt like from start to finish, that album just felt meaningful to me. Gunna's back was against the wall, and he dropped 40, is how I look at it. He dropped 40, not 50, not 60. He dropped about 40. You can't say he didn't meet the challenge. So what's interesting about it is a lot of our top rappers have had this moment where they were the underdog, whether you like it or not. What did they do next after controversy? It can be something like somebody doubting you. Somebody, maybe you got dropped from a label. Maybe somebody said you fell off. And I can give you some examples. Like when Rick Ross, had his whole, Officer Ricky situation. A lot of people were waiting like, yo, what is Ross going to do next? He dropped Deeper Than Rap. He met the challenge. I say he scored 40. When, Jay-Z, he went to the court case with Steve Stout, and people were just like, Jay-Z, he's this thug, blah, 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 blah. What is he going to do? He dropped a classic Blueprint. Historically, hip-hop rappers, when their back's against the wall, when they are being counted or considered to be the underdog, a lot of them have met the challenge. Now, there's examples of people that have not met the challenge. Tekashi kind of went through something very similar as Gunna. People calling you a rat, you snitch. And I actually was excited, not saying that I think Tekashi's a great artist. I don't even think he's a good artist, but I was excited to see where he's going to go as the underdog. And he dropped that album that I thought was awful. The one with Akon. I can't remember what it's called. But that's one case. Who's somebody? I was listening to Like a Pimp. Like, we were just listening to it again. And then I was like, dog, Lil Flip's verse on Like a Pimp, one of the best hip-hop verses I heard in my life.
But it's all right.
Simple as hell. But it's just so hard, right?
Okay.
And I said, yo, what happened to Lil Flip? And then I went to look at his catalog. I said he dropped Game Over. Game Over is his second most popular song. Sunshine being one, right? Lil Flip was so hot, and then he just dropped. What happened? Remember what happened? T.I. and him started beefing. T.I. was on the come up. Lil Flip was already there. So when T.I. started hitting these diss tracks and stuff like that towards Lil Flip, he was not able to meet the challenge.
Now you finna put a mask on Flip. I'ma empty out the clip and your ass gon' flip.
And so his music was just not hitting. And that kind of started the downfall. That kind of started his fall off. So, just this whole underdog topic just has to do with that. Like, I think more and more you're seeing these rappers meeting the challenge when it comes to having their backs against the wall. And in my opinion, they're making actually their best music when their backs against the wall.
I see where you're going with it, especially the whole Lil Flip topic. Listen, we probably got some listeners who don't know who Lil Flip is.
Which is crazy.
He had the game on lock, as people used to say.
Lil Flip.
Back 20 years ago, had the game on lock.
Yeah. Game over.
Game over. Flip. But no, so
oh, man.
It's funny you bring up Gunna, though, man, because I think Gunna is probably the right person we should use to kind of set this convo up. As you were talking, I was thinking of other artists who've dropped more recently. For example, I feel like Killer Mike has always been an underdog.
Yes.
As a rapper.
Yes.
It was so egregious that Killer Mike, he has pivoted, like over the last probably 10, 15 years, he pivoted to politics and community outreach.
Yeah.
And it's not to say he's pivoted completely, but he had to make that a part of his brand in order to allow people to realize that he was much bigger than rap to begin with.
Yeah.
So when you tie in the music, you realize that he's been talking real community stuff his whole damn life. The mainstream wasn't necessarily tapped into Killer Mike. What I like now is that Killer Mike just dropped a new album called Michael. And bro, this is the first Killer Mike album I've ever listened to straight through.
Me too.
Me personally.
Me too.
I've heard mad Killer Mike songs my whole life.
I've
going
listened
back,
to Run the Jewels 2 or something like that.
Same. But Killer Mike has been out for 20 years. And so
maybe 30.
Possibly so.
Pretty sure they were part of Goody Mob and all them. CeeLo. I'm saying
Andre
not Goody Mob.
3000.
Was it Goody? It's Goody Mob,
It's
right?
not Goody Mob. Dungeon Family.
Dungeon Family.
There
we go.
That's
There
the
we go.
word.
There we go.
So
Dungeon Family.
he's affiliated with Dungeon Family.
Yeah.
If you're familiar with Atlanta Southern rap, you know who Dungeon Family is, but the mainstream don't really know about
Wait,
these
so who the
people.
hell is Goody Mob?
Bro, Goody Mob was CeeLo Green. Remember he spun off and he had Big Gip?
Yeah.
Remember Big Gip?
Was Sleepy Brown? No. Oh, Sleepy Brown
Was he
Goody
not?
Mob?
I believe he
I
was.
can't remember.
But you see what I'm saying? Like, they've been underground.
Yeah.
Let's be very clear.
Yeah, they have.
And since Killer Mike has been associated with them, that ties into what he's even been a part of. You even brought up Run the Jewels. I would argue that's an underground group, right? They do very successful.
For sure.
Overseas, people
sure.
know who they are, but we talking about mainstream. The underground has been filled with Killer Mike, but I'm liking what's happening more recently where Killer Mike just dropped arguably one of the most important hip-hop albums of the year. And so how is it that we're in 2023. We got a guy who's been in hip hop for close to 30 years, who's been relatively underground for the virtual entirety of his career. He finally drops an album, and it's permeating through the consciousness of people at this stage. That, I think it shows you that I think people are kind of starving for music that's a little bit more in depth, that means something.
Meaningful music.
You know, and so when we tie back to Gunna, unfortunately, Gunna had to go through what he went through in order to drop a project this personal. Have we gotten music this personal from Gunna before this? No. On the last episode, we talked about what's the best albums of the year. You brought up Danny Brown and JPEG Mafia. Definition of underdogs and underground guys.
So I did want to do this exercise.
Yeah.
What is the underdog
What does that mean?
in hip hop?
I would define a hip hop underdog as a rapper. For whatever reason, their music, their presentation, their aesthetic, their style does not sit with the quote unquote mainstream. And when I say mainstream, I'm talking about the fans who are used to a specific type of music that gets accepted.
That's underground. Underdog.
I think underdogs are usually underground. Unfortunately.
Kind of, but like for me, underdog, there's adversity attached
So
to underdog.
I'll give you an example of probably somebody who doesn't fit into that. Toosi. Toosi he feels like an underdog.
He's an underdog.
He feels like an underdog.
He's an underdog.
Because
Yeah.
you see somebody with such, I think, extreme talent for music, but they're not where they clearly want to be. And every time you hear Toosi talk, he speaks from that perspective of somebody who
There's
is
a little
an
bit
underdog.
of there's a little bit of
chip
adversity
on his shoulder.
there. There's a little bit of adversity there. You can kind of tell he's not taken as seriously as his peers. There's people that do what Toosi does that's not as good as Toosi, but people are not giving him the credit that is due. I think that adversity sometimes is created. Sometimes that adversity, it just happens. Like I said, it sucks because some of our favorite rappers, their career never met, or never got back to where it needed to be because somebody knocked them off. I told you Lil Flip was essentially knocked off by T.I. Ja Rule, who was historically, Ja Rule is one of my favorite hip hop artists of all time. I don't care what anybody has to say. When Ja Rule was popping, he was dope.
Right.
He was essentially knocked off by 50 Cent. You know what I mean? And so a lot of rappers got knocked off. The adversity that came their way, they weren't able to meet it. Like, out of all the rappers I've ever heard, Jay-Z, all the rappers I've heard that got into a loss of diss and came back stronger somehow. Like, Jay-Z was down bad after Ether. Like, everybody, like, consensus was Nas killed Jay-Z.
Heard it when I was asleep that this Gazy and Cockefeller Records wanted beef. Started cocking up my weapon, slowly loading up this ammo.
Right.
And Jay-Z tried to meet the adversity
Yeah.
with additional disc records. He has a disc record called Blueprint 2, which I absolutely love.
Right.
Absolutely love that disc record. But it fell flat. Like, it didn't resonate with people. And the consensus was Jay-Z's, not that his career is over, but Nas beat him. But Jay-Z continuously made good music, which is always the case. If you're going to be an underdog, you have to make good music. Jay-Z made good music, and you can just brush that whole beef aside. Ether is easily the best disc record ever made towards Jay-Z, and it has not had an impact on his career. You know, another person, too, it really hasn't had an impact, Meek Mill. Meek Mill got destroyed by Drake. Back to back? Are you kidding me? Got destroyed. And Meek Mill didn't really meet the adversity well. But it didn't tarnish his career because I don't know why, but
Some may argue it did. My thing is this, though. I want to make sure this convo is not solely about people becoming underdogs because they were beefing with another artist or somebody went at them or any of that regard. Because
it can be anything.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, because that's also part of it. I get that, but I also want to talk about the other people who just generally, they're not what people gravitate towards. Like, no matter what they put out, it can be amazing music. It just doesn't get received.
Denzel Curry.
He's the definition of an underdog,
Summer
right?
Walker to me is an underdog, even though she makes great music.
Summer Walker's an underdog?
Summer Walker's an underdog.
How?
Because Summer Walker is her type of music is not something that is universally accepted. It's not something that you just hear all the time. Like, what she's attempting to do every single time she hops on an album is very hard. Vulnerable black woman in 2023, you know.
See, personally, I wouldn't call
she's an underdog.
I wouldn't call her an underdog per se because
I mean that's her persona.
Sure, but she's not an underdog by any stretch of the imagination.
She's a great artist.
Her people love her. She's received as such. The main street, she sells like somebody who's not an underdog. I would consider, like, for example, a Coil Ray an underdog. She's an underdog. She's somebody who people don't rock with or haven't rocked with for the longest. And she has to now look up to the people who she's trying to gain acceptance from. And that includes the fans and whatnot.
To piggyback back on my point, like Eminem came into the game underdog. Even when Eminem was successful, he still had this underdog chip to him. He's still rapping like a dude that thinks you don't respect him.
You know what's funny? Remember how I guess last episode we were gonna talk. Well, possibly we're gonna talk about who's the rap version of Jimmy Butler.
That's true.
Bro,
that's true.
bro.
That's true.
What we're talking about?
That's true.
You just described
that's
Eminem.
true.
You just described Jimmy Butler.
Yeah,
like somebody
true.
who
That's
like
true.
they make
That's
it.
true.
They're successful.
That's true.
But they still got this underdog chip on their shoulder. I will say this though, like as a side note, I'm noticing that it almost feels like we're at a changing point in hip hop in particular, bro. The killer drug. Drill stuff,
tired.
Bro. People are done.
Tired.
I'm telling you, people are done with it. People want more. This is the reason why people got so excited with the idea that Dirk was going to drop something meaningful with almost Heal, and when he didn't deliver, people were mad, and they were like, "Bro,
guess what?
We want more."
Guess what? Like if I tell you guys how much I've changed in my life, I've changed my diet. I've changed my daily routine. I've changed what motivates me, what inspires me. Like some of these artists like Dirk, Baby, at the end of the day, their audience is getting older. Jay-Z said it best, and I'm always going to follow this saying. He said, you want my old stuff? Well, listen to my old songs. I'm maturing as an artist.
Yes.
And you just have to assume that your fans are maturing too. They don't want to hear the same stuff. So when we hear somebody kind of like, you know, relating to our struggles. That's what we want to hear. We don't want to hear all this other nonsense.
Bro,
today, I was just like taking a couple things from my backyard, and Stoner came on by Young Thug. I'm a stoner. I'm a stoner. I'm a stoner.
Yeah, I love that shit.
And I was like, when I was younger, like, you know, when we going to DC and like, man, we just pre-gaming and just drinking. Like, what were we, 23, 24? Like, hell yes. Could you imagine bumping that joint at 36, 35,
Well,
33. It's hard.
I could bump it. I could bump it.
Hit the same.
I could bump it. It just depends on where and why I'm bumping.
It sounds wacky now.
Fair enough. That joint's all over.
He's like, I feel like Favo. I feel like Favo. I'm like, yo, like this is weird now.
Bro.
At 35, 34.
I get
but
you.
when you're like
I get
20
you.
something, oh, it's so tight.
Listen,
It's so tight.
You ain't wrong, but hey, guess what?
no,
Young
I
Thug
was
was an
stoned.
underdog at that point,
He was an underdog. Yeah. His name was Young Thug.
and it still is Young Thug.
In that song Stoner, he says slimes, he says YSL, he says all that stuff.
course.
And that was like one of his that was probably the first song I heard by him.
I mean,
Listen to the full episode. Link below.